Welcome to eAssist Growing Your Dental Business podcast. Tune in as the experts in dental business share tips and tools to grow your practice. To learn more, visit dentalbilling.com. Please welcome our next guest.
Hey everybody, it's Jacqueline here, and I have a great program for you today. I'm really excited to welcome and introduce Dr. Dave Striegel from San Diego, California, where we are going to discuss how he can help dentists and their teams lead and execute more effectively under stress. So Dave has a unique background. He is not a medical doctor. However, he is Dr. David Striegel. He has a PhD in sports psychology, coupled with his high engaging, no nonsense communication style, where he has been doing this for over 25 years. He's a successful performance coach, consultant, and speaker. So imagine this. You've got a playbook for peak performance straight from the trenches of pro sports, elite military units, and Fortune 500 boardrooms. Dr. Dave Striegel has swapped the locker room for the boardroom and the dental practice. So turning pressure into power for everyone from sports stars to busy dentists. He teaches anyone who wishes to improve their performance, specializing in motivated and focused clients and their teams thrive, helping them thrive under pressure. So this experience has enabled Dr. Dave to successfully target leaders' universal frustration in running their dental practices. So he helps elevate team leadership, culture, and performance while enhancing profit. I'm so excited to have you here today, Dave. Welcome.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Jacqueline. I know it's taken a little bit for us to get this put together, but I've been really excited to have this conversation today.
Well, I had so much fun visiting with you when we were in Phoenix at the Weevolution event back in May. And I remember thinking, this guy has an interesting story, and I love the uniqueness of your background and what you have to offer the dental community. And I just remember us sitting that one night at dinner, and we were sitting with that she's a consultant who was struggling with one of her offices, and the hygienist who was struggling. And I just remember sitting there listening to you thinking you had such great advice for her, and you gave her so many great ideas of how she could handle that whole situation. So I know that you're perfect for these dental practices that need help. So you have kind of an extensive background in sports, and I would love to hear a little bit more about your story and how your background kind of comes into play when you're coaching these dentists and their teams.
That's a common question I get when
Yeah.
people learn that my background is in sports psychology. My initial academic training and the first probably 10 years of my career were immersed in sports and corporate America. So how did you get here from there? And initially, when you study sports psychology, you do it, and at least I did. I did it because I really wanted to work in sport. And so I was able to do that. But very quickly, you realize that the concepts and principles that apply to high-level sport and athletics apply to the rest of us. Because if you have a consistent result that you want over time, not only for yourself, but with a group of people, also known as a team,
Right.
then that's the same thing as a sports team.
Yeah.
And it's just applied to, it might be law, it could be dentistry. It's a group of people working toward a common goal consistently under pressure and stress. So that opened up all kinds of possibilities for me in my mind as to how I could apply what I've done in sport to other walks of life, specifically dentistry, for the last 15 years. And I had a close friend of mine from many years ago who was involved in the dental field, and I reacquainted myself. We reconnected about 15 years ago, and he said, the stuff you do with athletes, they could really help my dental clients because we lay out these game plans for them and then they don't always do them. And that's when the light went off for me. Like, I never thought of dentistry, but I've since fallen in love with the field and the people in it. And so I spend most of my days talking with doctors, talking with teams, etc., about how they can execute better under the normal stresses and even the abnormal stresses like we've had in the last 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
and still excel and achieve the type of practice they want to have.
I love it. I love it. I think that's fantastic. So what are some of the causes, high stress moments in a dental practice that you've found as you're working with these dentists, you're working with their teams? I'm sure I know you've talked about recently, like with COVID and all of that, we know there's
Yeah.
a shortage of team members, but what even including that, what are the biggest stress levels of stress in a practice?
In my experience, the probably the most common stress that I find among dentists is staffing, and that could run all the way from attracting and hiring staff to then retaining and elevating staff,
Yeah.
and in some cases exiting staff, because if you think of the life cycle of a team member, not every team member is meant to be in a practice for their careers.
Yeah.
And that's part of the realization, I think, and that I took from sport, because not every athlete is meant to be on a particular team for their entire career.
Yeah.
But I think we assume that's the case. And so if we go into it thinking that, there's a time and a place when a team member may have been a great fit for a practice, and that may no longer be the case for a whole variety of reasons, not all of which are negative.
Yeah.
So the whole life cycle of staff right now, I find is a tremendous stressor, and it's putting a premium on doctors and dentists, creating a culture that team members want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Because we've seen the economics of staffing totally change over the last few years.
Right.
That means that team members are being either solicited or pursuing themselves opportunities where they may be able to be paid more than they're currently being paid. So why should they stay? And the science will tell you that compensation is only one of several reasons people stay in jobs, and it's not even in the top 2 or 3.
Wow.
But yet, if you're not paying attention to the other elements of why people stay in jobs, then they'll make it about compensation, because what else is there?
Yeah. So what else is there? Like, what are some of the other things why a person would stay in there?
I've found that there are basically 5, and growth, connection, balance, and flexibility in addition to compensation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those 5. And those 5 at various times in a team member's career may be more important or less important. So early on in someone's career, compensation may be more important because they're trying to establish themselves in an area or buy a home or something like that. Whereas later on, maybe they're looking for more connection
Yeah.
and just working with people they enjoy. And then there's growth and different phases of their careers. They can be more focused on growth. And then balance and flexibility, I've seen since COVID,
Yeah.
have become far more important to people than they were prior to. So those 5 things actually, even from a scientific standpoint, are kind of the places to start when you think of, how do I build a culture that someone's going to want to be a part of, even if maybe I'm not able to pay them top dollar in the market.
Yeah.
I find you don't have to. You need to be fair, but you don't have to be top.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah. That's good. I was just thinking about, every so often I talk about my daughter. She's been an office manager for a pediatric dentist for a few years. And long story short, he sold out to a DSO and things were changing, and she was kind of feeling like, and then she got married and she moved a little farther away. So it wasn't like a 5-minute commute anymore. And, winters in Utah are hard. So she's like, Mom, I don't want to drive that commute through the winter, all of that kind of stuff. And So, and she was pursued by a gal that she knew that was a dental assistant for a general dentist. And she just said, come to work for us. It's 5 minutes. She was one of her neighbors. She said, come to work for us. We need you.
Yeah.
And so she just kind of started out at the front desk, but she's in that transition period. So she's trying to decide. But I kind of think, she loves her schedule. She doesn't have to be the office manager anymore. She says, I work 12 to 6. I
Yeah.
don't have to go in early if I don't, it's like she has her set schedule. She loves it.
So what you're speaking of is the balance piece.
Yep.
And so and who knows, but had the place that she had been working for
Yeah.
been stronger in some of those areas, then perhaps she would have been willing to sacrifice the time to drive a little longer. Or let's say that she starts a little bit later in the day
Right.
because of the commute and the snow clearing and things like that that happens early in the morning.
For sure.
But that kind of points to, I mean, who knows what would have happened, but to me, it sounds like there was an opportunity missed
Yeah.
by whoever, by the DSO that came in and bought the practice, and they missed several of those 5 things with her.
Yeah. And I think that's common. I feel for these practices that jump over to DSOs, and I know there's that battle between private
Yeah.
practice and DSOs, and everyone's just trying to figure out what's going to be best for, them and their teams. And
Yeah.
a lot of time it's what's best for the doctor with if he's retiring or, there's so many equations you pull into play. So not that one is better or worse than the other. It's just a matter of trying to figure it all out and what's going to be best for everyone. So
Yeah. And whether you're DSO or a private practice, the 5 elements I mentioned still apply.
yeah. Yeah.
Now, they may apply in a little bit different way, depending on, like how flexible can you be? What kind of balance can you provide? All of those things might differ from one practice to the next, but the focus on them and the discussion around them, I think that can take place no matter who you are.
Yeah.
But I find that a lot of practices don't give any attention to multiple elements of that. And so as a result, people are left thinking, why am I busting my tail for someone who doesn't either appreciate me or doesn't flex with my life?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden that equation, that scale starts to tip the other direction. And, that's just kind of the way business goes sometimes, but I think it is avoidable for many dentists.
Yeah, I think, and she might have stayed, she'd been there several years. So it's hard to,
Yeah, maybe. Who
it's
knows?
hard to know,
Yeah.
it is. It's hard to know. Are there any other things that you can think of top of mind that are stressful to the dentist and the leadership team currently and the way the landscape is right now?
Yeah, I think along the lines of retaining staff there's always I find a major focus and pressure on executing systems. So what we've had happen over the last few years is there's been a lot of turnover in practices. And so new people coming in, other people leaving, and what happens to the internal operations of a practice, whether you're 4 people or 40 people. That places an emphasis and a pressure on the systems. And the bigger the team, the more important the systems tend to be. Because I can't just turn to Jacqueline and say, hey, can you do this for me? And it's done. There's communication elements that come into play. But the systems are there to provide people the certainty of what to do.
Yeah.
And if you think about what creates stress in someone's mind, and it's not all the time, but in many instances in a dental practice, the stress that is created in people's minds starts with a breakdown of a system.
Yes.
I don't care what system you have. In fact, virtually every one of my clients, I just ask them, what system do you want?
Yeah.
I don't have, set systems that I think work for everybody.
Right.
I'd much rather, I kind of approach it a little bit differently. I talk to the doctor or the dentist about, you tell me what you're good at. You tell me what you want. You tell me what you feel like uh, really gets you excited about being in dentistry. And
Yeah.
then we'll provide support around the rest. And the systems side of it is kind of a foundation. And
Yeah.
when those foundational elements of a practice start to break down because you have new people coming in and out, then that's where stress tends to start to build. And, this is not a knock on anybody in dentistry, but dental practices on average are not real good at training.
Yeah.
And part of that is they were never meant to be.
Right.
Nobody was trained to be a trainer. You were probably just good at the job and they said, oh, well, you're good at it, so train this person.
Yes. Yes. And
And
but they
that's
don't
like,
really have an SOP in place.
well, if there's nothing in writing, right? But even if someone's never thought about how they do it, it's the same reason why Michael Jordan, arguably the best basketball player on the planet, never became a coach.
Yeah.
Even if he'd wanted to be, chances are he probably would not have been very good. And that's why most superstars don't become successful coaches,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
because they don't know what it's like to struggle the way the rest of us did.
Yeah. They're
Really,
just,
they don't. I mean, that I can't
yeah,
understand
they're
basketball the way
so
Michael
good
Jordan
at it.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he would get mad at me because I don't see it the way he does. Well, I'm sorry, but that's just the way I was, that's just it. So same thing here is that I really feel for dental practices and the training element of it and the elevation process
Mhm.
after you get someone on board.
Right.
To me, that's where the real work starts,
Yeah.
is getting someone on board, assuming they're a good fit, and then getting them in a position to succeed and thrive.
Yeah, I love that. I've actually watched my daughter go through those growing pains as well, starting at a new
I'm
practice.
sure.
She's like, she just says, well, the office managers asked me to do this. And I'm like, okay, and I'll try to figure it out. But she hasn't really told me exactly how she wants it done. And I just think, oh, it's so hard. I just said, well, you're going to have to just respond back. I'd be happy to do that as long as you show me exactly what you want me to do. I
Yeah.
think that's the thing.
Yeah, and I think at some point I like to see team members taking notes. I mean, I know this is kind of an old school thing, and I'm probably dating myself here, but I like people taking notes. And there isn't too much I suggest or advise someone to do that it doesn't have some type of scientific basis.
Yeah.
And taking notes actually does have a scientific basis for learning and anchoring the learning at a deeper level. So
Mhm.
I like the idea of taking notes, which then makes it real easy to turn that into a written SOP.
Yes.
But
Yes.
someone has to do it.
Right.
But the response you typically get is, oh, we don't have time for that.
I know. I know. It's too bad. It makes it unfortunate because everything would run so much smoother in the long run if they had all of that set up in place.
Yeah. And I don't even need it to be like best practice necessarily. I just needed to to start with something in writing that gives a new person some idea of what to do and what's expected. Because not only is it going to give them some confidence in knowing, okay, here are the 5 things they expect from me. Let's just take a handoff, right? From when you
Yeah.
bring a patient from the back to the front. Give them a written outline of the 5 steps or however many steps you want there to be
Right.
so that they can memorize it and check it off in their minds. That helps them, but then what it also does is it gives the recipient, the rest of the team, confidence in them.
Yeah.
It's not just confidence in yourself, it's other people's confidence in you as well. So
Sure.
that's also something that was a easy transfer from sport, being so driven and anchored on confidence,
Yeah.
to dentistry. It's still performance. It's just in a dental practice.
I love it. I love the confidence that because you've shown that this person is being trained and everyone knows she's being trained and everyone's on the same page. And that's where that confidence comes from.
And I would say too, when it comes to team members, whether they're new or been with you a long time, I like to think there are two things that each team member brings to the practice that only they can bring. It's no one else's responsibility other than theirs, and that's effort and attitude.
Love it.
And you know where I learned that? I learned that coaching my son's Little League baseball team.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it just dawned on me at one point, these kids really need to learn that every practice, they need to bring a good effort and a good attitude. The rest is up to me as the coach.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about that into dental practice, if a team member is bringing great effort and great attitude, the skill and the knowledge, they bring some of that. But if they're coming from outside dentistry,
Right.
they don't know what they don't know. So the practice brings the knowledge and the skill. That's their sort of part in this equation.
Yep.
But the effort and the attitude is a non-negotiable. And that's 100% on the shoulders of the team member, because it doesn't matter their age, it doesn't matter their experience level or their background. They can bring those.
I love that. I think you hit it right head on. I feel like that's important in any new job, right? Wherever you are, no matter where you're getting a new job or looking for a job, you need those two things. And like you say, you need to bring it, if you're on a sports team, you need to bring it. I think and honestly, into relationships, even just with people in general or whatever
Well, and that's kind of what I think you realize, or at least I realized, over the years, is that when you're these are just people dealing with people,
Mm-hmm.
which means, to your point, it's really about relationships and how do I work with somebody, or how do I ask somebody to do something different that I need them to do than they've been doing, and how do I still help them feel like they can do it as opposed to feel like they can't.
Right.
But the effort and the attitude piece is something I like for my clients to talk about that's the responsibility of each team member to the practice. That's your responsibility to bring in.
Yeah.
But it's also the dentist's responsibility to bring that too.
Yeah.
And so it becomes an unwritten contract that we all have with each other.
Right. Yeah. Then it doesn't hurt to keep reminding the whole team.
And it then becomes a discussion point if you see either one of those go south.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So if someone's underperforming in their job, the first thing I ask is, are they withdrawing effort, or have you seen their attitude go through a significant change? Either one of those has to be addressed first. And there may be reasons behind those.
Yeah.
And then that provides an opportunity to have a really rich conversation about what your observations are.
I love it, but that simplifies it. I feel like it simplifies it,
Think about it though, Jacqueline, that when it comes to being under stress and pressure,
yeah,
should our objective be to complicate or simplify?
Right.
It's got to be to simplify.
Yeah.
And that's what anybody in the group who has competed in sports, and many of us have, when it gets to be toward the end of the game plan doesn't get more complicated. The game plan gets simpler to just do this.
Yeah.
Do your job.
Yes.
And that's it.
I love it. I love it. So what can dentists do like right now to really help? I don't know, what can they do right now to apply something into their practice right now to help them with the stress they're feeling? Or, maybe you have a suggestion of how to help find the right fit if they're looking for team members. What is your suggestion there?
Well, if the question is how do they find the right team members, I find it has to do with get better at the interview process.
Okay.
And there are a lot of resources out there to help people get better at those things, but the first thing, or maybe one thing I could suggest, is ask better questions and ask more questions around their actual, a prospect's actual experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
situations they've found themselves in, and how do they respond.
Yeah.
And don't expect perfection. I actually like to hear when they responded maybe in not the best way,
Because they
because
learn.
that's, to me, realistic.
Yeah, it's realistic and they probably learned from it, or they learned, you
Well,
know,
hopefully, yeah.
yeah, we're
That's,
always learning.
and that's what you're looking for, is someone who is, I think, confident enough in themselves
Yeah,
to be able to admit they made a mistake. Good, because we make them all the time here.
that's nice.
The question is what do we do about them? And
Yeah,
do we continue to make the same ones?
yeah. No, I love it. I think that's great advice. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about before we close up today? I know we've talked about a variety of things, but I feel like, I would love for dentists to know how to even reach out to you to
Mhm.
figure out, if you would be a good fit for their practice. One of the things I love, and one of my key takeaways from today, is the fact that you don't have a set of standard operating procedures for each individual dentist. You kind of work with them on what their strengths are and just try to help them with a plan that's going to work for them and their team. I love that. And if I were a dentist, I would be calling up knowing that, because I feel like sometimes I talk to people who are like, oh, well, here's all of our standard operations, and take a look over this and let's see if we can implement this in your practice, that kind of thing. So I do love that.
Yeah, and I don't want to de-emphasize, I don't want to criticize or anything standard operating procedures, but to
Yeah.
me, I start with the people first and
Mhm.
find out what their strengths and gifts are and
Mhm.
what's working well in a practice
Yeah.
before I suggest any changes to systems or anything like that, because you can end up messing something up that's working pretty well just because it's different than your system,
Yeah.
or you can totally miss something that is a first place to start. The couple of things I'd like to sort of end on is for the type of things that I coach, you don't have to be an athlete. You don't even have to like sports.
Yeah.
I can either, and I have plenty of clients who are, either high level athletes in their lives or previous careers, or no sports at all, don't even watch sports, no interest.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me. The concepts still apply, and I can either bring them in or not, depending on what works for the person.
Yeah.
So that's the first point, is that you don't have to like sports
Yeah.
to really have it help.
Yeah.
And the second thing is I've started a couple of new initiatives within the last year, one of which is a group coaching program that I call Empower and Excel. And it's specifically directed for the office manager leader level. And it's really high impact and getting some great reviews from the attendees. It's just in its baby stages still, but I'm really excited about that group coaching program that my colleague Stacy DiDonato and I are launching. And Stacy is a 25-year seasoned veteran of the administrative side of the practice. She started as a dental assistant, transitioned into administration
Nice.
years and years ago. And so she and I conduct that program together. And then the second thing that I'm just now starting, actually later this week will be my first session, is a podcast.
Oh, let's hear about your podcast.
And yeah, the podcast, I'm excited about it. And the podcast is called Athletes in Dentistry.
Okay.
And it's specifically, at least at the outset here, involved with me interviewing dentists or people in the dental community who have been athletic or have a deep love for sports, either in competition or just being a fan,
Oh,
and talking about their experience with sports and how it has transferred into their dental career.
that's
And so I'm starting with Dr. Leanne Sarah on Friday, and she was a member of the University of Southern California women's basketball team that won 2 national championships back in the
Wow.
80s.
Cool.
And she's a successful dentist, and so she'll be my first podcast guest coming up.
That's exciting. I can't wait to hear it. That's going to be so fun. I have been intrigued just from your sports background, bringing it into dentistry. So I'm sure this podcast will take off because I feel like it's just an intriguing thing, and especially with your background in sports psychology. And I love that you're so people focused when you're helping these dental practices. I love that. And I noticed that night when we were at dinner, we talked about like you were just like, well, when this gal was having a hard time, with I think a hygienist who had been there for a long,
Yeah,
she was an older lady, and you were just like, well, find out what she loves about her job, find out why she loves being there. If they're, like I just remember all of your questions were so geared to, let's see if we can't find a way to make this successful for everybody with having her in this practice.
Yeah, I remember, just real briefly, I remember in this particular case, there was a hygienist she'd probably been a hygienist for 30 years at least.
Yeah.
But seemed disconnected from the rest of the team and seemed content for it to be that way.
Yeah.
And there was some frustration, I think, at the dentist and team level with respect to this hygienist. And I've just not said, I'm not willing to settle for that.
Yeah.
Because I think our human nature is to protect ourselves. So there was a reason why she was disconnected. And so I encouraged the consultant that we were speaking to dig a little deeper, ask better questions, find out what really the motivation is behind the action.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think that made sense to me. And I know it made sense to the consultant. So it was fun to watch you kind of in
thank you. I appreciate
kind of in
that.
action.
Just a dinner.
Just a dinner. It was such a great dinner. So it's been such a treat to have you on today, Dr. David. I just loved having you here. And so how's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, I have a website. It's called drdavestriegel.com.
Okay.
And my company is Striegel Performance Coaching. And we specialize in helping practices of all sizes, all shapes. But the one common link is they want to excel.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily to become bigger or make more money necessarily. They may want to excel at the quality of their experience. They may want to excel at caring for patients or any other aspect that they really want to get better at. But that's the common link, is that they really want to strive to get better at something.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate everyone being here, and I'm excited to be able to see you again, Dr. Dave, sometime in our little consultant travels. Who knows when I'll see you again, but I just want everyone to know, thanks for joining us. Please visit, we're sponsored. This podcast is sponsored by eAssist Dental Solutions, and they're all about helping dentists with their revenue cycle management. So if you have any, if you're looking for some help by a third-party dental billing company, please visit dentalbilling.com. All of the pricing is on there. They're very forward with all of their pricing and everything. So you can kind of get a feel for all of that. And we're just excited to be here. Thank you again, Dr. Dave, and we'll see you guys next time.
The purpose of this podcast is to interview the consultants within our eAssist Consultant Network. This podcast is for informational purposes only. For more details, please visit the homepage of this podcast platform at dentalbilling.com. Thanks for listening.